The staccato crack of a gunshot split the morning quiet as Meredith Reynolds ducked behind her family's apple cart, sending a basket of red delicious tumbling across the dusty main street of Pioche, Nevada. It wasn't the first time Sheriff Walter Haywood had accidentally discharged his weapon in her vicinity, and judging by his swaggering approach, it wouldn't be the last. "My sincere apologies, Miss Reynolds," Haywood called out, holstering his Colt with practiced slowness. His smile never reached his eyes as he surveyed her scattered produce. Dangerous business, keeping the peace in 1878. Never know when a man might need to draw. Meredith straightened her back, brushing dust from her simple blue cotton dress. At 23, she'd weathered worse than Haywood's intimidation tactics in the 5 months since her father's passing left her to run their modest orchard alone. "Perhaps practicing your aim outside of town would be more appropriate, Sheriff," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. The older man's expression hardened. "Speaking of appropriate, I've been meaning to discuss that property of yours. 5 acres is an awful lot for a woman alone to manage." He stepped closer, towering over her. "Reasonable folk might suggest you sell to someone capable of handling it." "I'd be willing to make a fair offer out of respect for your departed father, of course." Before Meredith could respond, a tall figure materialized between them. Deputy Samuel Landry stood a full head above her, his broad shoulders blocking Haywood from view. She hadn't noticed the young deputy's approach, but the relief she felt was immediate. "Sheriff," Landry said, his voice calm but firm, "Mr. Peterson's reporting a disturbance at the saloon. Might need your attention." Haywood's eyes narrowed at his deputy. "Is that so?" His gaze slid back to Meredith. "We'll continue our conversation another time, Miss Reynolds." As the sheriff stalked away, Deputy Landry knelt to help gather the scattered apples. "You shouldn't antagonize him," he said quietly, placing fruit back in her basket. "I merely suggested he discharge his weapon outside town limits, as the law requires," Meredith replied, noting how the morning sun caught golden highlights in Landry's dark brown hair. At perhaps 28, he was the newest addition to Pioche's law enforcement, having arrived just 2 months ago from somewhere back east. "The law isn't always applied equally to those who enforce it," Landry said, handing her the basket. Their fingers brushed momentarily and Meredith withdrew her hand quickly. "So I've noticed," she said. "Thank you, Deputy." Landry nodded, his gray eyes serious beneath the brim of his hat. "Miss Reynolds, the sheriff has been taking an unusual interest in your affairs. I'd advise caution." "Is that a warning, Deputy Landry, merely an observation?" He glanced in the direction Haywood had gone. "If you ever need assistance, I can manage my own affairs," she interrupted, then softened her tone. "But thank you." He tipped his hat. "Of course. Good day, Miss Reynolds." As Deputy Landry walked away, Meredith watched him go, feeling both grateful for his intervention and wary of his intentions. In Pioche, a mining town where silver and lead had brought both prosperity and corruption, it was difficult to know who could be trusted. She sighed, gathering her wares to continue her daily sales. Her father had warned her about Haywood's interest in their property before he died. The orchard sat on what was now prime real estate as the town expanded, with a natural spring that made it particularly valuable in the arid Nevada landscape. By midday, Meredith had sold most of her produce and was preparing to return to the orchard when Sheriff Haywood's deputy returned, this time on horseback. "Miss Reynolds," Landry said, dismounting smoothly, "allow me to escort you home." She raised an eyebrow. "That's hardly necessary, Deputy." "Perhaps not, but Sheriff Haywood mentioned there have been reports of claim jumpers getting bold, moving beyond the mines and looking at farmland." His expression remained neutral, Would be irresponsible of me not to offer protection. Understanding dawned on her. I see. And would these claim jumpers happen to arrive if I refuse your escort? The corner of Landry's mouth twitched. I couldn't say, madam. I just know it would ease my conscience to see you home safely. Meredith studied him, trying to discern his true motives. He seemed genuine, but she'd been fooled before. Still, she wasn't foolish enough to refuse protection when it was clear she needed it. Very well, deputy. I accept your escort. They traveled the dusty road toward her property in silence for several minutes, the cart rattling beneath them as Landry led his horse alongside. How long have you been in Pioche, Deputy Landry? She finally asked. Just over 2 months, he replied. Came from Colorado. And before that? He glanced at her with a hint of amusement. You're very direct, Miss Reynolds. I find it saves time. Pennsylvania originally, served as a deputy there too, and before that, he hesitated. I fought for the Union. Meredith nodded. The war between the states had ended 13 years ago, but its shadow still stretched across the nation. What brought you west? Same as most, I suppose. A fresh start. He didn't elaborate further. As they approached her property, the neat rows of apple trees came into view, their branches heavy with fruit. The modest cabin her father had built sat nestled at the edge of the orchard, smoke rising gently from the chimney. Your hired help? Landry asked, nodding toward the cabin. No, Meredith replied. That would be Mrs. Whittaker. She was my father's housekeeper, stayed on to help me after he passed. They pulled up to the cabin, and Mrs. Whittaker appeared at the door, her gray hair tucked beneath a simple cap. Her eyes widened at the sight of Deputy Landry. Is everything all right, Meredith? She called. Fine, Mrs. Whittaker. The deputy was kind enough to escort me home. As Landry helped Meredith down from the cart, he lowered his voice. Sheriff Haywood will be by tomorrow. He's planning to make you another offer for the property. She stiffened. How do you know that? I overheard him discussing it with Judge Moore. His gray eyes held hers. The offer will seem fair, but I'd advise against accepting it. Why are you telling me this? Landry glanced toward the horizon, then back at her. Not all lawmen uphold the law, Miss Reynolds. Some just hide behind the badge. He tipped his hat. Good day. As he rode away, Meredith couldn't help but wonder about the enigmatic deputy, ally or threat. In Pioche, it was getting harder to tell the difference. The next morning, as promised, Sheriff Haywood appeared at her door just after sunrise. Meredith was already up, having risen early to begin harvesting. Miss Reynolds, he greeted, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. Beautiful morning for a business proposition. I'm rather busy, Sheriff, she replied, continuing to pick apples from the lower branches of the nearest tree. Undeterred, Haywood followed her. I won't take much of your time. I've drawn up a generous offer for your property. He pulled a folded paper from his vest. $500 more than fair for land this far from town. Meredith nearly laughed. The property was worth at least 3 times that, especially with the water rights. The orchard isn't for sale, Sheriff, as I've told you repeatedly. Haywood's cordial expression slipped. Miss Reynolds, I don't think you understand your situation. A woman alone can't manage this place. I've been managing just fine. For now, he said, his voice hardening. But times are changing in Pioche. The town council's discussing new ordinances about land use. Properties not being used to their full potential might face additional taxation. Meredith stopped her work, turning to face him fully. Are you threatening me with made-up laws, Sheriff? Not at all. Just informing you of coming changes. He smiled thinly. Changes that could be avoided if you had the right connections. She understood his implication immediately. If you're suggesting what I think you are, I'm suggesting you be reasonable, he interrupted, stepping closer. You're a lovely young woman, Meredith. Too lovely to be working yourself to the bone out here. As my wife, you'd want for nothing. I'm not interested in marriage, Sheriff, to you or anyone else. His expression darkened. Then sell the orchard. Today's offer expires at sundown. Tomorrow's won't be as generous. Before she could respond, the sound of hoofbeats approached. Deputy Landry appeared on horseback, looking between them with a carefully neutral expression. "Sheriff," he called, "there's trouble at the Silver Strike mine. Foreman says it can't wait." Haywood's jaw tightened visibly. "Deputy, your timing is remarkably poor. Sorry, sir. They're saying it's urgent." With a final cold look at Meredith, Haywood replaced his hat. "Consider my offer carefully, Miss Reynolds. I won't be patient forever." He strode to his horse and mounted up. "Landry with me." The deputy hesitated, meeting Meredith's eyes briefly before following his superior. Meredith watched them go, her heart racing. Haywood's threats were becoming less veiled by the day. She needed help, but in a town where the sheriff himself was the threat, who could she turn to? Later that afternoon, as she was loading her wagon with apples for the next day's market, Deputy Landry returned alone. "Deputy," she acknowledged cautiously. "Twice in one day. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "No pleasure, I'm afraid," he said, dismounting. "I came to warn you. The sheriff is planning to stop your wagon tomorrow on some trumped-up charge. Illegal transport of goods without proper license, or some such nonsense." Meredith set down her basket. "And how would you know this?" "Because he asked me to do it," Landry replied simply. "Said it would be a good opportunity for me to show my commitment to enforcing the law in Pioche." "And will you?" "Show your commitment." Landry removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "Miss Reynolds, I became a lawman to protect people, not to harass them into giving up their property." She studied him carefully. "Why should I believe you? You wear the same badge he does." "A fair question," he acknowledged. "And I don't have an answer that will satisfy you completely. All I can say is that I've seen men like Haywood before. They start small, throwing their weight around, bending rules. Then they break them entirely." He met her gaze directly. "I didn't come west to watch that happen again." Something in his earnest expression made her want to trust him. "What do you suggest I do? I can't afford to miss market day." Landry glanced toward the orchard. "Does your property have a back access route, something less visible from the main road?" "There's an old miner's trail that cuts behind the property, connects to the south road eventually, but it's rough terrain for a loaded wagon." He nodded thoughtfully. "I could meet you there before dawn, help guide you through. It would get you to town without crossing Haywood's path." Meredith hesitated. Going off with a man she barely knew in the pre-dawn darkness was precisely the sort of reckless behavior her father had warned against. And yet, her instincts told her Deputy Landry was sincere. "Why are you helping me?" she asked directly. Landry looked slightly taken aback by her frankness. "Because it's right," he said simply. "And because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing in the face of corruption." After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "I'll meet you at the junction of the miner's trail and my property line, 4:30 tomorrow morning." "I'll be there," he promised, replacing his hat. "And Miss Reynolds, be careful what you say to anyone in town. The sheriff has ears everywhere." As promised, Deputy Landry was waiting when Meredith guided her wagon to the old trail before dawn the next morning. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, casting everything in shades of gray. "You came," she said, surprised despite herself. "Said I would," he replied, moving to check the harness on her horse. "The trail gets rough about a mile in. We'll need to go slow." For the next hour, they navigated the narrow path in near silence, Landry occasionally pointing out hazards or offering a steadying hand when the wagon rocked precariously. As the sun rose fully, Painting the landscape in gold, they emerged onto the South Road, just a mile from Pioche. "We should be safe now," Landry said, glancing back at the trail they'd traversed. "Haywood will be watching the main road." Meredith studied him in the morning light. "Thank you, Deputy. I'm still not entirely sure why you're risking your position to help me, but I'm grateful." "Wearing a badge doesn't make a man right," he said simply. "My father taught me that." "Was he a lawman too?" A shadow crossed Landry's face. "No, he was hanged by one, for a crime he didn't commit." Meredith drew in a sharp breath. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. I was just a boy." He straightened his shoulders. "But it taught me something about power and how easily it corrupts." He glanced toward town. "I should go. Need to be seen reporting for duty before Haywood realizes we've circumvented his plans." "Deputy," she called as he mounted his horse. "What's your given name?" He looked surprised by the question. "Samuel. Sam to most folks." "Thank you, Sam," she said quietly. He nodded once, then rode ahead toward town. The market was already bustling when Meredith arrived. She set up her cart quickly, keeping a wary eye out for Sheriff Haywood. She just completed her first sale when Mrs. Whittaker appeared, looking flustered. "Meredith, thank heavens," the older woman said. "I went to check on you this morning and found you gone. With everything that's been happening, I'm fine, Mrs. Whittaker," Meredith assured her. "I just left earlier than usual." "Well, you should know the sheriff came by looking for you. When I said you'd already left for market, he seemed displeased." Meredith's stomach tightened. "Did he say anything else?" "No, but he had that look about him. The one your father always warned about." Mrs. Whittaker lowered her voice. "Be careful, dear. That man is dangerous when crossed." "I know," Meredith replied, scanning the market square. "But I can't let him bully me off my land." Mrs. Whittaker squeezed her hand. "Your father would be proud of your spirit. But he'd want you safe above all else." She glanced around nervously. "I should go. I left bread in the oven." As the older woman hurried away, Meredith noticed Sheriff Haywood making his way through the crowd, his expression thunderous. She braced herself for the confrontation. "Miss Reynolds," he said coldly upon reaching her stall. "Interesting route you must have taken to town today. My deputies reported you never passed the main checkpoint." "I wasn't aware there was a checkpoint, Sheriff," she replied evenly. "Or that citizens needed permission to travel to town." His smile was dangerous. "Special precautions. For your safety, of course." He leaned closer. "I don't appreciate games, Miss Reynolds, especially from a woman in your tenuous position." "My position is perfectly secure, Sheriff. I own my land outright, I pay my taxes, and I break no laws." "Laws can change," he said softly. "As can tax assessments, water rights, road access." He straightened. "Think carefully about my offer. You have until tomorrow." As he turned to leave, he nearly collided with Deputy Landry, who'd approached silently. "Sheriff," Landry acknowledged. "I've completed the rounds you requested." Haywood's eyes narrowed. "Have you now? Funny, I don't recall assigning you morning rounds." "Last night, sir, at the Silver Strike. You mentioned wanting the south end of town checked at first light." Landry's expression revealed nothing. After a tense moment, Haywood nodded. "Right. Well, report back to the office. We have matters to discuss." With a final warning glance at Meredith, he stalked away. Once he was out of earshot, Landry spoke quietly. "He's planning something. Be careful going home." "What can I do?" "He's made it clear he won't stop." Landry's expression turned grim. "There might be a way to handle this legally. Judge Moore is corrupt, but the circuit judge arrives next week for the quarterly court session. If we had evidence of Haywood's intimidation tactics." "Evidence how?" "It's his word against mine, and in this town, his carries more weight." "Not if we catch him in the act," Landry said thoughtfully. "I have an idea, but it's risky. Can you meet me tonight? Same place as this morning after dark. Meredith hesitated, then nodded. 9 o'clock. The rest of the day passed in tense anticipation. Meredith sold her produce quickly, eager to return home before Haywood could cause more trouble. As she packed up her remaining goods, she noticed whispered conversations stopping as she passed, townspeople watching her with a mixture of sympathy and wariness. By sunset, she was back at the orchard, pacing nervously as she waited for the appointed meeting time. Mrs. Whitaker had gone to bed early, complaining of a headache, leaving Meredith alone with her thoughts. At 8:30, she slipped out of the cabin and made her way to the meeting point. The night was clear and cool, stars pricking the velvet sky above. She waited in the shadow of a large pine, jumping at every sound. "Miss Reynolds," she gasped, spinning to find Deputy Landry standing behind her. "You startled me. I apologize. Habit from tracking." He gestured toward a fallen log. "Shall we sit? I don't think we'll be overheard here." Once seated, he outlined his plan. "The circuit judge, Henry Wilson, is a fair man. I've dealt with him before. If we can document Haywood's harassment and present it to Wilson, he has the authority to suspend the sheriff pending investigation." "Document how?" Meredith asked. "Written statements from you, witnesses if possible. But most importantly, we need to catch him making explicit threats." Landry pulled something from his pocket, a small notebook. "If you record every interaction, every threat with dates and times." "He'll just deny it," she said, frustrated. "Yes, but combined with witness testimony." Landry hesitated. "You trust Mrs. Whitaker completely with my life. She's been like family since before my mother died." "Good, because I think Haywood will make his move soon, tomorrow possibly, if Mrs. Whitaker could be present, hidden but able to hear any conversation." Meredith considered this. "It might work, but what if he becomes violent?" "That's why I'll be nearby," Landry assured her. "I've arranged to have duty in your area tomorrow. If he goes too far, I'll intervene." She studied his face in the moonlight. "You're risking your career, maybe more. Some things are worth the risk." His gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "It's not just about your orchard, Miss Reynolds. Haywood has been abusing his power for years. The town deserves better." The conviction in his voice stirred something in her. "Very well. I'll speak with Mrs. Whitaker in the morning." As they rose to leave, a twig snapped in the darkness nearby. Both froze, listening intently. "Probably just a deer," Landry whispered, but his hand moved to his holster. "Still, we should go. Separately. I'll leave first, circle back toward town. Wait 10 minutes before you return home." Meredith nodded, suddenly very aware of how alone they were. "Be careful, Deputy." "Sam," he corrected quietly. "When we're not in town, I'd prefer if you called me Sam." "Sam," she repeated. "Then you must call me Meredith." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Good night, Meredith. Lock your doors tonight." The next morning dawned cloudy and cool, unusual for early September. Meredith explained the plan to Mrs. Whitaker over breakfast, watching anxiety cloud the older woman's features. "It's dangerous, challenging a man like Haywood," Mrs. Whitaker warned. "Your father tried, you know, before he fell ill." He gathered evidence of Haywood's dealings with the mining companies, how he looked the other way for certain violations in exchange for payoffs. This was news to Meredith. "What happened to this evidence?" "I don't know. After the accident at the mine that killed those 3 men, your father became more secretive. Said it was safer if I didn't know." Mrs. Whitaker's eyes welled with tears. "A week later, he took to his bed with that mysterious illness, never recovered." A chill ran through Meredith. "Are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything, dear, just saying your father was a healthy man until he crossed Walter Haywood." The older woman wiped her eyes. "But I'll help you. Edward would want me to." They spent the morning preparing for Haywood's inevitable visit. Mrs. Whittaker would position herself in the pantry, door cracked open enough to hear any conversation in the main room. Meredith would try to keep Haywood inside the house, where witnesses might not see what transpired, but Mrs. Whittaker could hear everything. Around noon, the sound of approaching hoofbeats signaled the sheriff's arrival. Meredith took a deep breath, checking that Mrs. Whittaker was in position before opening the door. "Sheriff," she greeted, keeping her voice neutral. "What brings you by?" Haywood dismounted, adjusting his gun belt as he approached. "Miss Reynolds, I believe we have business to conclude." He gestured toward the house. "Might we speak inside? What I have to say is better discussed in private." "Perfect," Meredith thought, stepping aside. "Of course." Once inside, Haywood removed his hat but remained standing, surveying the modest cabin with barely disguised contempt. "I've reconsidered my offer," he began. "Given your reluctance, I'm prepared to increase it to $600. Very generous considering." "Considering what exactly?" Meredith asked, remaining near the door. "Considering the difficulties a woman alone might face. Accidents happen, Miss Reynolds. Trees fall, fires start, harvests fail." He smiled thinly. "It would be a shame to see this place deteriorate due to misfortune." "Are you threatening me, Sheriff?" "Threatening? No. Warning, perhaps." He moved closer. "Pioche is changing. The mining operations are expanding. This land will be developed eventually with or without your cooperation." "The land is mine, legally deeded. You have no rights," he interrupted, "depend on who enforces them." His voice hardened. "I've been patient, Meredith. More patient than most men would be with a stubborn woman, but my patience has limits." He closed the distance between them, and Meredith fought the urge to retreat. "You have two choices," he continued. "Sell to me for a fair price and leave Pioche with your dignity intact, or—" He reached out, touching her cheek with rough fingers. "Become my wife and enjoy the protection my name provides." Meredith jerked away from his touch. "I choose neither." Haywood's expression darkened. "Then you leave me no choice but to take more direct action." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "Your father made the same mistake, you know. Thought he could defy me. Look how that ended." "What are you saying?" Meredith gasped, struggling against his grip. "I'm saying your father didn't die of natural causes," Haywood hissed. "Arsenic is remarkably effective and difficult to detect, a lesson you do well to remember." Before Meredith could respond, the door burst open. Deputy Landry stood in the doorway, his revolver drawn and aimed squarely at Haywood. "Let her go, Sheriff," he commanded, his voice cold. "Now." Haywood released Meredith's arm but didn't step back. "Deputy Landry, this is a private conversation between myself and Miss Reynolds." "Sounded more like a confession to murder," Landry replied, keeping his gun steady. "Step away from her." For a tense moment, Haywood seemed to consider drawing his own weapon. Then, slowly, he moved away from Meredith. "You're making a grave mistake, Deputy," he said quietly. "One that will cost you everything." "The only mistake was not stopping you sooner," Landry replied. "Miss Reynolds, are you hurt?" "No," she answered, rubbing her arm where Haywood's fingers had left red marks. "Mrs. Whittaker," Landry called, never taking his eyes off Haywood. "I know you're listening. Did you hear the sheriff's admission about Mr. Reynolds's death?" The pantry door opened, and Mrs. Whittaker emerged, pale but resolute. "Every word," she confirmed, "including his threats against Meredith." Haywood's face contorted with rage. The word of a housekeeper and a love struck deputy against the sheriff. "Judge Moore will laugh you out of his courtroom." "That's why we won't be going to Judge Moore," Landry said. Circuit Judge Wilson arrived early. He's waiting at the telegraph office with Marshal Parker from Carson City. They've been quite interested in reports of corruption in Pioche law enforcement. For the first time, uncertainty flashed across Haywood's face. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Landry gestured toward the window with his free hand. "Look outside." As Haywood turned, Meredith saw what Landry had already noticed: two riders approaching, one wearing the distinctive badge of a U.S. Marshal. "Sheriff Walter Haywood," Landry said formally, "you're under arrest for the murder of Edward Reynolds, attempted extortion, abuse of office, and threatening a citizen under your protection." He stepped forward, revolver still trained on Haywood. "I'll take your weapon now." With surprising swiftness, Haywood reached for his gun. Landry fired once, the shot striking Haywood's shoulder, spinning him backward. The sheriff's revolver clattered to the floor as he stumbled against the wall, clutching his bleeding arm. "That was foolish," Landry said, kicking the fallen weapon away. "Now we can add attempted assault on a peace officer to the charges." Outside, the riders had heard the shot and were galloping toward the cabin, weapons drawn. Meredith sank into a chair, the reality of what had just occurred washing over her. Mrs. Whittaker hurried to her side, wrapping a comforting arm around her shoulders. "You knew," Meredith said to Landry as he secured Haywood's hands behind his back. "You knew about my father." Landry nodded grimly. "I suspected. When I took the deputy position, I started investigating Haywood's activities. Too many accidents happened to people who opposed him." He glanced at the wounded sheriff with disgust. "I just needed him to confess." "So you used me as bait," she said, unsure whether to feel angry or grateful. "No," Landry countered firmly. "I tried to protect you, but I knew he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted one way or another." He looked genuinely regretful. "I'm sorry for putting you at risk." There was no other way to bring him to justice. The marshal and judge burst through the door, taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. As they took custody of Haywood, Meredith found herself watching Landry, the man who had risked everything to help her, to bring justice for her father. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope. The following weeks brought dramatic changes to Pioche. Sheriff Haywood was held for trial, his confession to murdering Edward Reynolds overheard by multiple witnesses, ensuring he would hang. Judge Wilson, disturbed by the extent of corruption he uncovered, extended his stay to conduct a thorough investigation. Several town officials, including Judge Moore, were implicated in various schemes. Samuel Landry was appointed acting sheriff, a position that became permanent after a unanimous vote by a newly formed town council. His first official act was to hire a second deputy, ensuring law enforcement in Pioche would never again rest in the hands of one all-powerful man. For Meredith, life settled into a new rhythm. The harvest was plentiful that autumn, and with Haywood's threats removed, she found joy again in tending the orchard her father had loved. Mrs. Whittaker remained by her side, more family than employee. On a crisp October evening, as Meredith sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains, she heard the now familiar sound of Sam Landry's horse approaching. These visits had become regular over the past month, first official check-ins to ensure her safety, then gradually evolving into something more personal. "Evening, Sheriff," she called as he dismounted. "Miss Reynolds," he replied, removing his hat as he climbed the steps. "Beautiful sunset." "It is," she agreed, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "Would you care to join me?" He sat, placing his hat on his knee. They watched the changing colors in comfortable silence for several minutes. "The circuit court has set a date for Haywood's trial," he finally said. "First week of November. Judge Wilson wants to personally oversee it." Meredith nodded. "Will I need to testify?" "Yes, but you won't be alone." His hand moved tentatively across the space between them, covering hers. "If you'll allow it, I'd like to be there with you, not just as the sheriff." She turned her hand beneath his, intertwining their fingers. As what then? Sam's gray eyes met hers, earnest and unguarded. As someone who cares for you deeply. He hesitated. I know it's soon and perhaps improper given everything that's happened. But my feelings, Meredith leaned forward, pressing her lips gently to his, silencing his uncertainties. When she pulled back, his expression of surprise made her laugh softly. I've wanted to do that for weeks, she admitted. Why didn't you? He asked, a smile spreading across his face. A lady doesn't kiss a gentleman without proper encouragement, she replied primly, then broke into another smile. And I wasn't entirely certain my affections were returned. They are, he assured her, bringing her hand to his lips. Most decidedly. As the last light faded from the sky, they talked of simpler things: the coming winter, the plans for next year's crop, the town's gradual healing from Haywood's corrupt influence. When Sam finally rose to leave, he lingered, reluctant to end their evening. Meredith, he said softly, I know courtship should proceed at a proper pace, but considering all we've already faced together. He took a deep breath. Would you allow me to call on you formally? With honorable intentions. I would be disappointed if you didn't, she replied, her heart lighter than it had been in years. He kissed her once more, a promise of things to come, before mounting his horse. I'll see you tomorrow, then. Perhaps for dinner, I'll have Mrs. Whitaker prepare something special, she agreed, watching him ride away into the gathering darkness, the silver star on his chest catching the last light of day. For the first time since her father's death, Meredith felt truly safe. Not just because justice had been served, but because she had found someone who stood for what was right, regardless of the cost. Someone who saw her strength rather than her vulnerability. Someone who might, in time, become more than a protector, a partner. The path ahead would not be easy. Haywood's trial would resurrect painful memories, and rebuilding trust in Pioche's governance would take time. But with Sam beside her, Meredith knew she could face whatever came next. As autumn deepened into winter, Meredith and Sam's courtship became the talk of Pioche. They made a striking pair, the independent orchard owner and the principled sheriff, who had brought down his corrupt predecessor. Some whispered that it was too soon after the scandal, that propriety demanded a longer period of mourning for the town's upheaval. But most citizens supported the match, seeing in it a symbol of healing and new beginnings. Haywood's trial proceeded as scheduled, with Meredith giving testimony about his threats, and Mrs. Whitaker confirming his confession regarding Edward Reynolds's murder. Additional witnesses came forward, emboldened by Haywood's fall from power, describing years of intimidation and corruption. The evidence was overwhelming and the verdict swift, guilty on all counts. On a cold December morning, Walter Haywood was hanged for his crimes. Meredith chose not to attend the execution, instead spending the day in her orchard pruning trees for the coming spring. Sam found her there afterward, his expression solemn but relieved. It's done, he said simply, taking the pruning shears from her hands and setting them aside. He's gone. Meredith nodded, emotions warring within her. I should feel closure, shouldn't I? Instead, I just feel empty. That's natural, Sam assured her, drawing her into his arms. Justice doesn't always bring peace immediately, but it gives us room to heal. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Thank you for everything. No thanks needed, he murmured into her hair. I did what any decent man would do. No, she corrected, looking up at him. You did what few men would have the courage to do. You risked everything to stand against a powerful man who was wrong. Sam's expression softened. Maybe I had something worth risking everything for. The winter months passed in a sweet rhythm of work and courtship. Sam continued his duties as sheriff, implementing reforms that gradually restored the town's trust in law enforcement. Meredith prepared her orchard for spring, studying agricultural journals for new techniques to improve her yield. Each evening, when his duties permitted, Sam would ride out to the orchard. Sometimes they simply talked on the porch, bundled against the cold. Other nights, Mrs. Whitaker would prepare dinner, tactfully retiring early to give them privacy. On Sundays, they attended church together, gradually becoming accepted as a proper couple in the eyes of the community. By February, as the first hints of spring began to appear in the Nevada landscape, Sam began to speak of the future more concretely. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they sat before the fire in Meredith's small parlor, "about expanding the sheriff's office. The town's growing again, now that the mining operations aren't being strangled by Haywood's schemes." "You'll need more deputies," Meredith agreed. "Yes, but also a proper jail. The current one is barely more than a glorified shed." He hesitated. "The town council has approved funding for a new building. They've asked me to oversee the design." "That's a vote of confidence in your leadership," she observed. "It is. And it means I'll be staying in Pioche for the foreseeable future." His gray eyes searched hers. "I hope that meets with your approval." "It does," she replied softly. "Very much so." Sam reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "Then perhaps this won't seem too presumptuous." Meredith's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's," he explained. "One of the few things I have from my parents. I've carried it with me since leaving Pennsylvania, never quite knowing why." He took her hand. "Now I understand. I was waiting to find you." "Sam," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "Meredith Reynolds," he said solemnly, "these past months have shown me what true courage and grace look like. You've faced loss and threat with dignity, never surrendering what was rightfully yours." His voice deepened with emotion. "I find myself hoping you might consider adding my heart to your possessions. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Meredith could only stare at the ring, then at the man offering it, this good, honorable man who had changed her life so completely. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite her tears. "Yes, Samuel Landry, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though always meant to be there. He gathered her into his arms, his kiss full of promise and devotion. "Mrs. Whitaker, who had undoubtedly been listening from the kitchen, appeared with suspicious promptness, bearing a tray with 3 glasses and a bottle of sherry. "I believe congratulations are in order," she said, her eyes twinkling. "You knew," Meredith accused, laughing through her tears. "The sheriff asked my blessing last week," Mrs. Whitaker confirmed, pouring the sherry. "As the closest thing to family you have here, it seemed proper." "And what did you tell him?" Meredith asked, though the answer was obvious. "I said that Edward would have approved wholeheartedly, and so do I." The older woman raised her glass. "To your happiness, my dears. May it be as boundless as the Nevada sky." They planned a spring wedding when the apple trees would be in bloom. Word spread quickly through Pioche, and soon Meredith found herself receiving congratulations from townspeople who had once watched her warily during her conflicts with Haywood. The change in attitude was striking a testament to Sam's influence in healing the town's divisions. As March arrived, bringing warmer days and new growth, Sam began making improvements to the cabin. Though he owned a small house in town that came with his position, they had decided to make the orchard their home. The property held too many memories for Meredith to leave, and Sam admitted he preferred the peace of the countryside to the bustle of town. "We'll need more space," he pointed out one Saturday as they inspected the cabin's exterior. "Especially if we're to have a family someday." The casual mention of children brought a flush to Meredith's cheeks and a warmth to her heart. "The east side could support an addition," she suggested. "My father always talked about expanding that way." Sam nodded, making mental calculations. 2 additional bedrooms, perhaps. "And a larger kitchen for Mrs. Whittaker. You want her to stay on?" Meredith asked, surprised. "Of course, unless you'd prefer otherwise." He looked concerned. "I assumed she was part of the package, so to speak. She's been your family for years." Meredith kissed him impulsively. "You are a remarkable man, Samuel Landry, for recognizing that a good housekeeper is worth her weight in silver," he teased. "For understanding what family means," she corrected. "Even the family we choose rather than the one we're born to." Construction on the addition began the following week, with Sam recruiting several townsmen to help with the larger tasks. The work progressed rapidly, fueled by goodwill and Meredith's apple pies. By early April, as their wedding day approached, the expanded cabin was nearly complete, a physical manifestation of their joined lives taking shape. The night before their wedding, Sam rode out to the orchard one last time as an unmarried man. Tradition dictated they should spend the night before their ceremony apart, but he had one final gift to deliver. Meredith met him on the porch, the setting sun highlighting the copper in her brown hair. She wore a simple blue dress, not her wedding gown, which was safely hidden away, but she had never looked more beautiful to him. "You shouldn't be here," she scolded without heat. "It's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding." "Only on the wedding day itself," he countered, pulling her into his arms for a quick kiss. "We still have a few hours until midnight." She laughed, the sound like music to his ears. "Very well, Sheriff. State your business." "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a package from his saddlebag. "A wedding gift of sorts." Meredith unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a leather-bound ledger. Opening it, she found page after page of familiar handwriting, her father's. "Where did you get this?" she gasped, running her fingers over the neat columns of figures and notes. "It was in Haywood's office, hidden behind a false panel in his desk," Sam explained. "I found it while clearing out the last of his possessions. I believe it's the evidence your father was collecting." Tears filled Meredith's eyes as she paged through the ledger. "It's all here. Every corrupt deal, every bribe, names and dates." She looked up at Sam. "This is why Haywood killed him." "Yes, your father was a brave man, Meredith. He was gathering evidence not just against Haywood, but against a network of corruption that spread through half the territory." Sam touched her cheek gently. "Judge Wilson is using this ledger to pursue cases against mine owners and officials all the way to Carson City." "Then his death wasn't in vain," she whispered. "No, and now you have a piece of him back." Sam pulled her close. "I thought you should have it before tomorrow, a reminder that he's with us in spirit." Meredith held the ledger to her heart. "Thank you. This means more than I can say." They sat together on the porch swing until stars appeared in the darkening sky, talking of the past and the future, the legacy they would build together. When Sam finally left to return to town, his kiss held a promise of forever. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with just enough breeze to carry the sweet scent of apple blossoms across the orchard. The ceremony would be held there, beneath the flowering trees Edward Reynolds had planted nearly 20 years earlier. Chairs had been arranged in neat rows, and an arch of twisted branches marked the spot where the couple would exchange their vows, in the cabin's main bedroom. Meredith stood before the mirror as Mrs. Whittaker made final adjustments to her gown. The dress was ivory silk, simple yet elegant, with pearl buttons down the back and delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was swept up, with a few curls left loose to frame her face, and a crown of apple blossoms sat ready to complete the ensemble. "You look like an angel, Mrs. Whitaker declared, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Your mother would be so proud. Your father, too." "You think so?" Meredith asked, smoothing the silk over her hips. "Sometimes I wonder if this is all happening too fast. It's barely been 6 months since Samuel saved you from a dangerous man and brought justice to your father's memory." Mrs. Whitaker interrupted gently. "Some matches are made over years of careful consideration. Others are forged in fire, tested and proven true before they've hardly begun." She adjusted a curl at Meredith's temple. "Yours is the latter. Nothing to apologize for there." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Judge Wilson, who had agreed to escort Meredith down the aisle in her father's stead. The older man entered, resplendent in his best suit, and stopped short at the sight of her. "My dear Miss Reynolds," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are a vision." "Thank you, Judge," Meredith replied, touched by his reaction. Though she had known him only a few months, his kindness during Haywood's trial and aftermath had created a bond of respect between them. "Sheriff Landry is a fortunate man," Wilson continued, offering his arm, "and from what I've observed, worthy of his good fortune. Shall we make him the happiest man in Nevada territory?" Meredith placed her hand on his sleeve, taking a deep breath. "We shall." Outside, nearly the entire population of Pioche had gathered for the ceremony. The mining town rarely saw such joyous occasions, and the citizens had embraced the opportunity for celebration. As Meredith emerged from the cabin on Judge Wilson's arm, a collective murmur of appreciation rose from the assembled guests. At the end of the aisle, beneath the arch of blossoming branches, stood Sam. He wore a new black suit, his sheriff's badge polished to gleaming, his hair neatly trimmed. But it was his expression that caught Meredith's breath, a look of such profound love and wonder that she felt tears spring to her eyes. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. They spoke traditional vows, promising to love and honor each other until death parted them. When Sam slipped a gold band onto her finger to join her mother's ring, his hands were steady but his eyes shone with unshed tears. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was both a culmination and a beginning. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up throughout the orchard, laden with food prepared by the women of Pioche. A small band played lively tunes, and lanterns hung from the lower branches of the trees, creating a magical atmosphere as darkness fell. As the newly married couple moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, Meredith was struck by how much had changed in less than a year. From the dark days after her father's death, through Haywood's escalating threats, to this moment of pure joy, the journey had been both painful and transformative. "Happy, Mrs. Landry?" Sam asked softly as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. "Very," she replied, savoring the sound of her new name, "though I can't quite believe it's real. I assure you it is." His arms tightened around her waist, "and it's only the beginning." Later, as the last guests departed and Mrs. Whitaker tactfully announced she would be spending the night with a friend in town, Sam and Meredith stood alone on the porch of what was now their home. "Well, Sheriff," Meredith said, a blush coloring her cheeks despite her bold tone, "shall we retire?" Sam's smile was both tender and heated as he swept her into his arms. "Yes, Mrs. Landry, I believe we shall." Spring flowed into summer, and the newlyweds settled into a rhythm of shared life. Sam continued his duties as sheriff, rising early to ride into town and returning each evening to the orchard. Meredith managed the growing business of Reynolds Orchard, which had expanded its sales to neighboring settlements thanks to Sam's connections throughout the territory. Their first major challenge as a married couple came in late July, when a group of claim jumpers attempted to seize a silver mine on the outskirts of Pioche. The confrontation turned violent, and Sam was wounded in the shoulder while protecting one of his deputies. When word reached Meredith, she drove the wagon into town at a dangerous speed, heart pounding with fear. She found Sam at the doctor's office, pale but conscious, his left arm bandaged and immobilized. "It's just a flesh wound," he assured her as she rushed to his side, her face white with worry. "Looks worse than it is." "You were shot," she retorted, tears threatening. "That's bad enough." Dr. Morris, finishing his work, nodded reassuringly to Meredith. "Your husband will be fine, Mrs. Landry. The bullet passed clean through, missed anything vital. He'll need to rest that arm for a few weeks, but he should recover completely." "Thank you, doctor," she said, then turned stern eyes on Sam. "You're coming home." Now, for once, Sam didn't argue. The pain and blood loss had weakened him more than he cared to admit. He allowed Meredith and the doctor to help him into the wagon, where she had prepared a makeshift bed of blankets. During the ride home, as the wagon jostled over the uneven road, Sam drifted in and out of consciousness. In his more lucid moments, he noticed the rigid set of Meredith's shoulders, the tight grip of her hands on the reins. "I'm sorry," he murmured, "for frightening you." She glanced back at him, her expression softening slightly. "You should be. I've only had you as a husband for 3 months. I'm not ready to be a widow." "Not planning on making you one," he assured her, reaching for her hand with his good arm. "Got too much to live for now." The next 2 weeks tested them both. Sam, unaccustomed to inactivity, made a poor patient, growing restless and irritable as the days passed. Meredith, balancing care for her husband with management of the orchard during its busiest season, found her patience stretched thin. Their first real argument as a married couple erupted when Sam attempted to saddle his horse, intending to ride into town despite the doctor's orders for rest. "You're not going anywhere," Meredith declared, blocking the stable door. "I'm the sheriff," Sam countered, frustration evident in his voice. "I have responsibilities. You have deputies, competent ones whom you trained yourself." She crossed her arms. "Your responsibility now is to heal properly so you can return to duty without reopening that wound." "Meredith, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not an invalid, no. You're a stubborn man who thinks the town will fall apart without him." Her voice rose with emotion. "Did it ever occur to you that I might need you too? That watching you ride away each morning, knowing what happened last time, might be more than I can bear right now." The naked vulnerability in her expression stopped Sam cold. He stepped away from the horse, moving to take her in his arms instead. "I didn't think," he admitted quietly. "I'm sorry." She leaned into his embrace, careful of his injured shoulder. "I'm not trying to cage you, Sam. I know your work is important, but please, just a few more days. For my peace of mind, if not your own health." "All right," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. A few more days. In the end, it was nearly 3 weeks before Dr. Morris declared Sam fit to return to limited duty. By then, husband and wife had reached a new understanding and acknowledgement of the fears and needs that came with loving someone whose work involved danger. As summer waned into autumn, life in Pioche continued to evolve. The reforms Sam had implemented in the sheriff's office were bearing fruit, with crime rates dropping and public trust in law enforcement rising. Meredith's orchard produced a record harvest, confirming her father's vision for the property's potential. In late September, as they sat on their expanded porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Meredith broached a subject that had been on her mind for weeks. "Sam," she began, setting aside her mending, "There's something I need to tell you." He glanced at her, noting the mixture of nervousness and joy in her expression. "What is it?" She took his hand, placing it gently against her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby. Next spring, around the time of our first anniversary." For a moment, Sam simply stared at her, his expression blank with shock. Then, as her words sank in, a smile spread across his face, the most radiant she had ever seen. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "Our baby, Doctor." "Morris confirmed it yesterday," she said, laughing as Sam pulled her onto his lap, heedless of propriety even though they sat in full view of anyone who might pass by. "He thinks late April or early May." "When the apple trees bloom," Sam murmured, placing his large hand protectively over her middle. "Perfect timing." As autumn deepened, bringing cooler days and crisper nights, Meredith's condition became their joyful secret. They waited to share the news, savoring the private knowledge between them. Sam became even more protective, insisting on helping with chores Meredith had always handled alone, much to her amused exasperation. "I'm with child, not made of glass," she reminded him one afternoon as he attempted to take over the feeding of the chickens. "Can't I just want to help my wife?" he protested innocently. "You can help by not hovering," she replied, shooing him away. "Go, do sheriff things. I promise not to lift anything heavier than a chicken until you return." Their playful banter masked deeper emotions, Sam's protective instincts heightened by impending fatherhood, Meredith's determination to remain independent even as her body changed. They navigated these waters carefully, learning when to yield and when to stand firm, building the foundation of their family one day at a time. By November, as Meredith's condition became noticeable, they shared their news with the community. Mrs. Whitaker cried happy tears, immediately beginning plans for the nursery in one of the newly built rooms. The townspeople offered congratulations and advice in equal measure, the women of Pioche particularly eager to share their wisdom with the young mother-to-be. As Christmas approached, bringing the first heavy snowfall of the season, Pioche prepared for its annual holiday celebration. The town had flourished in the year since Haywood's removal, with new businesses opening and families moving in as word spread of the reformed governance. The holiday festivities would be grander than ever, a testament to the community's renewal. On Christmas Eve, Sam and Meredith joined the townspeople in the newly built community hall. The large room was festooned with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, a massive tree standing in one corner decorated with candles and handmade ornaments. Children darted between adults, their excitement palpable, while musicians played traditional carols. Meredith, now showing visibly at 4 months pregnant, wore a new dress of deep green wool that Sam had ordered from Carson City as an early Christmas gift. As they moved through the crowd, accepting well wishes and holiday greetings, she couldn't help comparing this Christmas to the previous one, her first without her father, when the shadow of Haywood's threats had hung over her like a storm cloud. "You're thinking too hard," Sam murmured, his arm securely around her waist. "I can practically hear the wheels turning." She smiled up at him, "Just reflecting on how much can change in a year." "For the better, I hope?" he asked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. In answer, Meredith stretched up to kiss him softly, heedless of the approving chuckles from nearby townsfolk. "For the better in every way," she assured him. Later that night, after returning to their snow-blanketed home, they exchanged private gifts before the fireplace. Sam presented Meredith with a delicate gold locket containing a lock of his hair. "So you'll always have me close to your heart," he explained. Meredith's gift to Sam was a hand-knitted blanket, butter soft and large enough for a man of his size. For those nights when duty keeps you in town," she said as he wrapped it around both of them. As they sat entwined before the crackling fire, Sam's hand resting protectively over their growing child, Meredith felt a profound peace settle over her. The journey that had brought them here had been fraught with danger and loss, but it had led to something beautiful, a love as steady as the mountains that surrounded Pioche, as life-giving as the water that nourished her orchard. "I love you, Samuel Landry," she whispered, nestling closer into his embrace. "With all that I am." "And I love you, Meredith Landry," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "You and our child are my whole world." As winter gave way to spring, the apple trees once again budded and bloomed, marking a year since Meredith and Sam had exchanged their vows beneath those same branches. The orchard was a riot of pink and white blossoms, filling the air with sweet fragrance as nature celebrated the cycle of renewal. Inside the expanded cabin, another kind of anticipation gripped the household. Meredith's time was near, her body heavy with the child that would arrive any day. The nursery stood ready, lovingly prepared by Sam, and Mrs. Whittaker, a cradle hand carved by Sam from apple wood, curtains sewn by Mrs. Whittaker, and a rocking chair that had belonged to Meredith's mother, retrieved from storage in town. On a warm afternoon in early May, as Meredith sat in that very rocking chair by the nursery window, she felt the first unmistakable pains. Sam was in town, but Mrs. Whittaker recognized the signs immediately. "I'll send for the sheriff and the midwife," she said calmly, helping Meredith to the bed. "Your little one has decided today is the day." The labor progressed steadily through the afternoon and into evening. Sam arrived just as the sun was setting, having ridden from town at a dangerous pace after receiving Mrs. Whittaker's message. His face was pale with worry as he entered the bedroom. "I'm here," he said, taking Meredith's hand. "I'm right here, love." Meredith, sweaty and exhausted but determined, managed a smile. "Good timing, Sheriff. I believe your deputy is about to arrive." The midwife, Mrs. Hollister, shooed Sam from the room during the more intense phases of labor, sending him to pace the parlor instead. He wore a track in the rug, stopping at every sound from the bedroom, praying as he had never prayed before for Meredith's safety, for the child's health, for the strength to be the husband and father they both needed. Just after midnight, a new cry joined the night sounds of the orchard, strong, indignant, and undeniably alive. Sam froze mid-pace, his heart hammering as he stared at the bedroom door. When it finally opened, Mrs. Hollister appeared, her lined face wreathed in smiles. "Sheriff Landry," she announced, "you have a son, a fine, healthy boy, and your wife is doing well." Sam felt his knees weaken with relief. "Can I go to them?" the midwife encouraged, stepping aside. In the lamplight of the bedroom, Meredith sat propped against pillows, her face tired but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up as Sam entered, her smile as bright as sunrise. "Samuel," she said softly, "meet your son." Sam approached the bed with reverent steps, peering down at the tiny face nestled against Meredith's breast. The baby had a shock of dark hair and skin still mottled from birth, but to Sam, he was perfection incarnate. "He's beautiful," Sam whispered, reaching out a tentative finger to touch his son's miniature hand. To his amazement, the tiny fingers closed around his in a grip surprisingly strong for one so small. "Strong, too." "Like his father," Meredith said, her voice thick with emotion. "Would you like to hold him?" With careful movements, Sam gathered his son into his arms, marveling at how such a small being could instantly claim so large a portion of his heart. "What shall we name him?" he asked, unable to take his eyes from the newborn's face. "I was thinking Edward Samuel," Meredith replied. "For my father and for you." Sam nodded, throat too tight for words. Edward Samuel Landry, a name that honored the past while embracing the future, a legacy of justice and love that would guide their son's path. As the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting the room in gentle gold, the new family nestled together on the bed, Meredith resting against Sam's chest, baby Edward sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. Outside, the apple blossoms stirred in the morning breeze, a living reminder of how beauty could emerge from even the harshest circumstances, given time and tender care. "Thank you," Sam murmured against Meredith's hair. "For what?" she asked drowsily. "For our son. For loving me. For being brave enough to stand your ground when it would have been easier to run." He tightened his arm around her shoulders. "If you hadn't stayed to fight for your orchard, we might never have found each other." Meredith smiled, her eyes drifting closed with exhaustion. "Then I suppose we owe Sheriff Haywood a debt of gratitude in a strange way. His threats brought you to my defense. And justice brought us together," Sam finished, watching over his wife and child as they slept, his heart fuller than he had ever imagined possible. In the years that followed, the story of how Sheriff Samuel Landry had stood against corruption to protect Meredith Reynolds became part of Pioche's local lore, a tale told to newcomers, as evidence of how the town had transformed from a lawless mining camp to a thriving community. The once feared sheriff's office, under Sam's leadership, became known throughout the territory for its fairness and integrity. Reynolds' orchard flourished as well, expanding to include not just apples but peaches and pears, becoming one of the largest fruit producers in eastern Nevada. Meredith, balancing motherhood with business acumen, earned respect throughout the region for her agricultural innovations. Edward Samuel Landry grew into a strong, thoughtful boy with his father's sense of justice and his mother's determination. 3 years after his birth, he was joined by a sister, Catherine Elizabeth, whose arrival coincided with the completion of Pioche's new schoolhouse, a project Sam had championed from its inception. Through the changing seasons of their lives, the joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges, Sam and Meredith remained each other's steadfast supporters, their love deepening with each passing year. The foundation of their relationship, forged in the fire of adversity, proved unshakable in the face of life's inevitable storms. On their 10th anniversary, as they again stood beneath the apple trees that had witnessed their wedding vows, surrounded now by their children and friends who had become family, Sam took Meredith's hand, the years having added character to his handsome face but not diminished the love in his eyes. "10 years ago, I promised to love and honor you all the days of my life," he said, his voice carrying across the orchard. "That promise has been the easiest I've ever kept." Meredith squeezed his hand, her heart as full as it had been on their wedding day. "And I promised to stand by your side through whatever came our way," she replied. "I never imagined then how rich and beautiful our life would be." As they sealed their renewed commitment with a kiss, cheered on by their children and the community they had helped build, both were keenly aware of how far they had come from those dangerous days when a corrupt sheriff's threats had brought them together. What had begun as one man's stand for justice had blossomed into a lifetime of love as enduring as the orchard that continued to bear fruit season after season, a living legacy of courage rewarded and faith fulfilled. In the dappled shade of apple trees planted by Edward Reynolds and tended by generations to come, Sam and Meredith Landry wrote their ongoing story, one of a deputy who had stood between danger and justice, and the woman who had given him a cause worth fighting for. Together, they had transformed a tale of corruption and fear into one of hope and renewal, proving that even in the wild heart of Nevada, Love and justice could put down roots deep enough to weather any storm.